Welcome back to the channel. This video is going to show you my attempts at making homemade bread. Some are very comical, sad, and then victory. Stay tuned. Okay, so here we go. This is attempt number 1 at making sandwich bread from scratch. I had my lukewarm cup of water, which I put in my mixing bowl. The recipe that I used off of Pinterest, it called for a 1/4 cup of sugar, so I added that. And then mixed it around to get the sugar to dissolve. Now I did mix it until it was completely dissolved, or so I figured it was mostly dissolved, and then I added the yeast. Now it did say to add the yeast after the sugar was dissolved, so that's what I did. And then I let it sit for 5 minutes, which is what the recipe said to do. And then I started off with the rest of the ingredients. After the 5 minutes, I took a look, and to me, it's been a while since I've made bread, but I bake a lot of other things, and the yeast looked like it had done its job. So I started with the other ingredients to make the dough. So again, the recipe that I used from Pinterest called for 3 to 3.5 cups of flour. I had a 1/2 cup measuring scoop, so that's why you're going to see me kind of measure and level off more scoops than 3. So I added 3 cups to start, and I used an different bowl so that I could add it in gradually instead of it adding in a scoop at a time. After I got all the flour measured out, it was time to start adding everything to the mixing bowl. So I also added 7 tablespoons of butter. Now you could use olive oil, vegetable oil as well, but I had butter softened, so that's what I used. Put in the egg, and then the flour, and then the salt. I immediately realized that putting the flour in a separate bowl wasn't going to work out so well as far as how I was trying to get it in the mixer, so it helped to actually, if you're going to put it in a separate bowl, put it all in the mixing bowl and then turn on your mixer, so that way you're not having to fight the mixing. So at this point, I was really excited because it was coming together really well. It was forming into a dough. I was so pleased with the way it looked. It looked really great. The dough looked great. But again, I said this was my first attempt, and it took me 3 tries to get it right. So let's take a look. It's at this point here that I think, oh, I need to add more flour. I stopped the camera recording and added more flour, and this is what happened. So if you're going to add more flour, try to add all you're going to add in to begin with, but if not, you may need to actually mix it by hand, and it made quite a mess. So the Pinterest recipe said to let it knead for 5 minutes, or to do it by hand for 5 minutes. Of course, since I had the machine with the bread kneading attachment, that's what I used. So after that was done, it was time to take it out. Now, I think the recipe said to leave it in the bowl, so I ended up taking it out of the bowl, and I sprayed that glass bowl with some olive oil and then put the dough in that to rise. I did cover the bowl to give it, and it said to do that in a warm place for about 10 minutes, so that's what I did. I also decided to knead the dough a little bit to get it in that nice ball shape before I put it in the bowl, thinking that would help to make sure that I didn't just throw it in the bowl without giving it some sort of shape. But as we'll find out, that maybe wasn't what I needed to do for this ring. I decided also to use the clear saran wrap, and thought that would be good for this to keep it airtight. And as you can see, it looks really good. The dough, I'm thinking I'm looking good for some bread. While I'm waiting for the bread to rise, I'm getting my pans ready. This recipe said that it made 2 loaves of bread, so that's what I got ready to section into each pan. So the time had passed for the rising period that the recipe said. Again, I'm not going to attach it to this video because it obviously didn't work for me, but I Realized, hey, their dough didn't rise very well, or not as I would have expected it to, but I went forward with the recipe anyway. Cut it into 2 halves. As you can see, they're really tiny, and I put them in each pan, hoping that once it got into the oven and started to get warm that it would puff up more, and you'll see what happens. The recipe also said to brush the tops with an egg, a beaten egg, so I did make sure I brushed both loaves with that as well. Now they're ready for the oven, so I put them in the oven at 425 for 30 minutes. This is what they looked like when they came out. I was really disappointed. I was thinking, oh, maybe let them cool off. They were hard to get out of the pan, very heavy. And once I cut into it, I could see that the inside of the dough was very gummy, very dense. It tasted okay, but you know what? It's just not bread, especially not sandwich bread. So after what looks like a failure, of course, on my end, I needed to test the yeast. So I tested the yeast, and this is what it looked like. After posting that yeast picture on Facebook, it seemed that everyone agreed that the yeast should be fine. So I decided to go for round 2 of bread making. This time I decided to let the yeast do its thing in the cup of lukewarm water in a measuring cup instead of adding it to the bowl, thinking that might be why. So I decided, since I'm going to try something different with the yeast, then I'm going to try something different with all the ingredients. So I measured out, I'm using a 1 cup measuring cup this time, measuring out the last bits of my flour into the bowl and getting that ready first. And when I say I'm at the last bits of my flour, I seriously was at the last bit of my flour. This used all but maybe a 1/4 cup of what I had remaining of flour in the entire house. Here's what the yeast looks like before going into the mixture. So I'm adding the mixture into the flour at this point, and I'm also using vegetable oil instead of butter this time, adding the salt, and then I think I forgot an ingredient. Tell me what I forgot. So as I'm watching this, I can tell you exactly what I forgot to add. Forgot to add the sugar. I didn't add the sugar to the yeast water mixture. So no wonder the second time is not going to do well. And also this time I decided, after the kneading process was over, to leave the dough in the bowl, thinking that maybe taking it out shocked it, caused some issues, and then let it see if it would rise that way. So after covering with the plastic wrap, I put a dark towel over it and put it on the back part of the stovetop because I had the oven on preheating. As you can see, the second attempt was not well at all, and it did not turn out, so I'm not going to bother showing you. This is what the dough looks like the third attempt. Covered it with the dark cloth and put it in the oven to help with rising, and that seemed to help. It rose quite a bit, so I was very pleased to start with. Put it in a 400-degree oven, and I decided to reduce the time to 20 minutes, as maybe I cooked it too long. Took a peek, and it looked really nice in the oven. And finally, I had victory with my bread. We did manage to wait till the next day to make a sandwich. There is a little tiny slice missing because we had to taste test it after it cooled. It was very good, so we were excited to make sandwiches with it the next day for lunch, and couldn't have been happier with this bread recipe finally that I put together. Fortunately, now I'm out of yeast, so I need to find more yeast because we are now nearing the end of the sandwich bread. We don't usually eat a lot of sandwich bread, but it's always nice to have. And the biggest thing I could tell you, or lesson that I learned, is don't give up on something just because it doesn't work out. Keep at it and find the right balance of ingredients so that the recipes work and taste good. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe so you can see what we're up to, what fails and successes that we have with recipes, gardening, everything that we're going to be doing on this channel. What types of recipes have you tried and had to try a few times before you were successful? Leave it down in the comments and we'll catch you on the next one.